it's Heather and
hi, Sammy.
Today you guys are going to be learning about some really cool animals out here at Back to the Wild, including an owl, a turkey vulture, an opossum, and a snake. So we have lots of cool stuff for you guys to see. So make sure you pay lots of attention because there's plenty of fun things to learn about, and we'll see you in just a moment. Hi guys, it's Heather. Now you're going to notice throughout this video that sometimes we're wearing a mask and sometimes we're not. And that's because we're going to be working with some mammals today. And when it comes to diseases, if it's a mammal disease, other mammals are more likely to contract it, whereas birds, not so much. So when we're working with our mammal ambassadors, you're going to see us wearing masks just to be safe, so we keep them safe and keep ourselves safe with everything going on. And when you see us working with our other ambassadors, we should be fine. So first off, I want to talk a little bit about who we are and what we do. If you're watching this video, you may have been to Back to the Wild before, maybe when you were really young with your school, maybe for a tour with your family. So you kind of know that we are a wildlife rehabilitation center, meaning we take in animals that are injured, that are orphaned, that are sick. We do our best to get them better and then to release them back into the wild. Because wild animals don't belong in a cage or on a leash. They deserve to be free and they belong out in the wild. Sometimes we have animals that end up with permanent disabilities. So for example, this barred owl, who is angrily pulling at her leash right now, she thought she was supposed to be on vacation. But you'll notice, well, you won't really see her injury because it's tough to see. She came in with an eye injury and she's actually blind in her right eye, which can make things very difficult for her when she's hunting with depth perception, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. We have owls and birds that have bad wings that never healed. We have animals that have bad legs that never healed quite right. So those are the animals that you're going to be seeing today, the ones that are permanently disabled that can never go back into the wild, because our #1 goal here is to release animals back into their natural habitats. Now when we're rescuing wildlife, we're not exactly rescuing cute little bunny rabbits from owls or eagles or hawks, because that's part of nature. That's all part of the food chain, the food web, predators and prey. That's all nature. What we are rescuing animals from are people. So if we take a look over here, I have a few photos for you to see. First off, we have a herring gull, and you'll notice the herring gull has plastic rings wrapped around his neck. That is not part of nature. That's people leaving their litter laying around, which is going to be a common theme that you're going to see in these photos. Here we have a Lake Erie water snake who had a glass bottleneck trapped around his body. And if you look closely, you can actually see where it cut off the circulation to the rest of his body. And unfortunately, some of his organs died and we were not able to save him. And that would never have happened if our litter hadn't been left laying around. And lastly, I have this photo of an American robin, and it looks like he died choking on a worm, but this is actually an elastic shoestring that looks like a worm that the robin thought was a worm and tried to eat. And once again, this would have never happened if our garbage hadn't been left laying around. Of course, trash is not the only thing that affects wildlife. Destruction of habitat, contamination of habitat, lots of different things can make our wild animals very sick. For example, a lot of us don't want mice in our homes, so some people put out rodenticides, which are poisons to kill mice. And when the mouse eats the rodenticide, and then the owl eats the mouse, the owl gets sick too. So we don't just kill the target animal, we kill the things who eat those animals. So a great example of that would be out in the oceans. In the oceans, there's a lot of mercury buildup from factories and things like that. And little fish get contaminated with just a little bit of mercury, but then the bigger fish who eat them, the mercury becomes more concentrated in their system because they're eating lots of little fish who have just a little bit of mercury in them. And it gets bigger, more concentrated the further up the food chain you go, to where dolphins are just rife with mercury poisoning because they're eating all of the things out there containing mercury. Now, when a toxin gets more concentrated as you go up the food chain, we call that biomagnification. Again, that's biomagnification, which is a big word, but it just means that those toxins get more concentrated. And guess what? Animals at the top of the food chain tend to be the ones that suffer the most, and guess who's at the top of the food chain? Usually us. So we can have big problems for that as well. In fact, there are always warnings about seafood, about mercury levels and things like that. So we have to be really careful about how we take care of the earth, because it can make a difference for our own health and our own lives as well. Not to mention, these animals are pretty cool, and we do not want to see them disappear. So she's hopping around a bit, but that's pretty normal. Now, when we have lots of little kids out here, we like to teach about words like adaptations and habitats, but I'm sure if you guys are high schoolers out there listening in, you guys probably already know what those words mean. Of course, a habitat is a space where an animal lives. It includes shelter, food, water, and space. There has to be enough room for everybody, right? So 4 most important things for a habitat: food, water, shelter, space. Now, as far as adaptations go, adaptations are the tools an animal has built into their body that help them to survive. A really great example of one of your adaptations, if you guys hold your hand up and you touch your thumb to the tips of your fingers, that's an opposable thumb. It means your thumb goes the opposite way of your fingers. Most animals do not have an opposable thumb, which might not seem like a big deal. But as an experiment, I want you to tape she interrupted us a little bit, that's okay. I want you to tape your thumb to the palm of your hand and then try to do things you do every day, like write your name on a piece of paper, tie your shoe, pick something up. It's a lot more difficult to do if you don't have a thumb. So that's actually a very important adaptation that humans have. How do animals get adaptations? Well, that's through a process of natural selection. So when we talk about predators and prey, it's really easy to think that predators are the bad guys, but they're not. Predators do a few different things. They don't eat healthy animals, by the way. They eat animals that are weak, whether it's because of disease or bad genetics or an injury. So they help weed the sick and the injured and the weak out of the ecosystem. And that allows for strong genetics and strong changes in those genetics to, procreate and to keep going. So for example, if you're looking at a squirrel, and let's say that you had a red-tailed hawk, and the red-tailed hawk sees 2 squirrels, and one fell out of a tree and broke its leg, and the other one is perfectly healthy, running around, climbing. Well, to be a good squirrel, you need to be able to climb. And if you're a squirrel falling out of a tree, breaking your leg, guess what you're not very good at? Climbing. So when the hawk eats that squirrel, he prevents that squirrel from having babies who are also bad at climbing, because that could lead to a whole slew of problems for them. Or if we look the other way and how adaptations are created, if you have a green beetle and a brown beetle and they're living in a green field, birds are going to be able to spot that brown beetle really fast, whereas the green beetle will be harder to spot. So that means they're going to eat all the brown beetles and leave all the green beetles. So the green beetles will be the ones that continue to have babies. So that's natural selection and how we get the really cool adaptations that a lot of these animals have. Speaking of adaptations, let's take a look at our owl ambassador here. So here we are with our barred owl. She wanted to sit in the tree, so we decided to come a little closer to you guys. By the way, I know she's a barred owl because she has bars on her feathers. In Ohio, we also have an owl called a barn owl that likes to live in barns. They don't look anything alike, but their names are similar, so sometimes people get them mixed up. You'll notice that her throat is moving a lot. She's just panting. It's just like dogs and cats when they're hot. They don't really sweat, so they pant to help relieve heat. Now, I know this is an owl because of her face. I had a group of preschoolers and I asked them, how do you know that this is an owl? And a little boy raised his hand and said, because she looked like she flew into the side of a building. And that's kind of true. They have a very flat face, and unlike other birds, their beak points down rather than straight out from their face, and there's a good reason for that. Now, this whole flat face, that's called a facial disc, and then the feathers that are kind of curved around the outer rim of that facial disc are called the facial ruff, and then all the other feathers are auriculars. And auriculars just kind of cover everything else up, so that facial ruff is usually pretty hard to see because they're covered up with all the other feathers. But what's the reason for this fancy face and this rather asymmetrical face too? It's for hearing. Most owls are nocturnal, meaning they come out at night. And so they have to have a really great sense of hearing. So their facial disc and facial ruff, they're asymmetrical. Plus, they have muscles attached to every one of those feathers so they can manipulate all the parts of that facial disc and it actually change ever so slightly the shape of their face to catch more sound. On top of that, their ears are asymmetrical. So for nocturnal owls, the name of the game is asymmetry because it all helps them pinpoint sounds so that they can be really great hunters. Now we know this because there are some owls, like burrowing owls, that are diurnal, meaning they come out during the day, and they don't have the asymmetry that nocturnal owls like barred owls have. So we know that this plays a big role in how they hunt and they find their food. So how it works is through a process called triangulation. Owls have an extra large medulla, which is a part of the brain used for spatial mapping, and they're able to use the sounds they pick up with their ears and map all around them where those sounds are coming from. So when they hear a mouse squeaking, if you imagine a triangle, when they hear a mouse squeaking, the sides of that triangle are going to be uneven. And what they're going to do, because that volume's hitting the ears at different times and it's at different levels, they're going to turn their face. They look kind of funny when they do it, but they're going to turn their face until the sound is the same in both ears. And then they know the sides of that triangle are perfectly equal and they're looking exactly at where that mouse is that they want to have for dinner. Which is why there are so many amazing videos on YouTube of owls catching mice from underneath of the snow that they never even saw. So really an amazing sense of hearing for these guys. On top of that, they have very special eyes. Whenever she blinks, you'll notice kind of a bluish color go across her eyes first. And what that is her nictitating membrane. And a nictitating membrane is just kind of like a third semi-transparent eyelid. It's kind of like having a built-in pair of goggles that they can take on and take off whenever they feel like doing it. So it's an important adaptation for helping them to protect their eyes. You know, when you're flying through the sky, there's a lot of dirt and dust blowing in your face, and being able to protect their eyes is really important so that they can keep an eye out for where they're going. Not to mention when they catch food. Oh, that's okay, everybody's got to do it. But not to mention when they catch their food, their prey doesn't actually want to be caught, so they need to have ways of protecting themselves. Some owls, like great horned owls, which are even bigger than this barred owl, they will eat skunks. And to protect their eyes from skunk spray, they have that nictitating membrane. So it works out pretty well for them. Now, I love having kids guess how much this owl weighs, so give me just a moment. I'm going to set her down, and then we're going to play a little bit of a guessing game. That'll be kind of one-sided with the video. There we go. So, I want everybody to think for a moment how much they think that that owl weighs. So just looking at her, how many pounds do you think that she weighs? So just get a number in your head. Now, when we have small children and I ask this, a lot of times the first guess I get is 60 pounds. Well, I couldn't exactly hold 60 pounds on the end of my arm. If you guys have a full milk jug, put it on the end of your hand and hold your arm straight out, it gets really heavy. It's hard to hold up, and milk jugs don't weigh that much. This owl, she weighs 2 pounds. That's it, just 2 pounds. The males weigh about 1.5 pounds. They're really lightweight. If she were a mammal, she would weigh closer to 10 to 15 pounds, but she's not a mammal, she's a bird, and birds need to have adaptations to keep themselves lightweight. So here we can see a humerus of an owl, and you can see that they are hollow. You can see right through them. In fact, you can see the light shining right through there. It's going to be hard to focus on because they're really little. But these hollow bones are what helps to keep them light enough to fly. And you might be thinking, if you've learned this in biology already, well, if their bones are hollow, how do they make bone marrow? That's a really common question that we get. And they do still make bone marrow, just like we do. But they do it in some of their long bones and in their breastbone. So some of the bones are a little more solid, but for the most part, their skeleton is hollow. Now, there are some birds who can't fly, like a penguin or an ostrich or a rhea or an emu, And those birds do have solid bones. If a penguin had hollow bones and was trying to dive under the water, wouldn't turn out so well, right? So they want to be able to get deep to catch fish. They would keep popping up to the surface if they had hollow bones like an owl does. But on the other hand, if this owl had a solid skeleton like us, she would never be able to get off the ground. So they have to have that hollow skeleton to keep them lightweight so that they can fly. Which, by the way, is why they go to the bathroom so much. It also helps to keep them lightweight and ready to go at any time they need to. Now, I do want to mention that owls and a lot of other birds, when they eat their food, they tend to eat their food all at once in one big bite. My little owl pellet here is a little broken up, but that's okay. So this is called a pellet. Because just like you and I, they cannot digest the bones and the fur and things like that. So they cough it back up in a nice, neat little hairball. If you have a cat, your cat may have coughed up a hairball, and you will have noticed that the cat's hairball is far messier. But owls cough up a very nice, neat little pellet. Now, a lot of birds do this as well, including songbirds and herons and things like that. They all do a similar thing, but they always get a different name. So if it's a gull or a heron coughing it up, they call it a bolus. And if it's an owl coughing it up, they call it a pellet. So essentially the same thing though. But we can pull those pellets apart and we can actually find what the owls have for dinner. So this is how biologists a long time ago were able to figure out the diets of these animals. One of the ways is by waiting for them to cough up pellets. Now, I had a group of preschoolers and I asked them, what do you think the owl had for dinner? And I had a little girl say, a baby penguin. So this is actually the skull of a rat. We're very careful to hold it the right way now. Penguins are never this small and they don't have a completely fused skeleton. So that is a rat skull. Okay, so you guys, oh, one more thing I want to mention. When I picked her up, I did have to put a big glove on because birds of prey have very specialized feet. They have talons, and talons aren't just about those long, sharp claws that are incredibly powerful. It's also about their ability to grip and tear with those long, sharp talons. So these guys are able to grasp things, pick them up, and carry them away, which you don't see with most other birds. So that's another important adaptation for a bird of prey to be able to be a successful bird of prey. So a really great thing for them. And some, like osprey, have other adaptations, like these little spiracles on their feet to help them hold on to slippery fish. So very, very cool. All right, well, we have a lot to learn about. Next, we're going to be meeting our turkey vulture ambassador. So hold on for just a moment and we will be right back. And we're back with our turkey vulture ambassador. Now, you've probably heard people call them buzzards, but they are not buzzards. Buzzards are a completely different hawk-like, well, they are hawks, hawk bird that lives in Europe. So buzzards are not turkey vultures, and turkey vultures are not buzzards, even though they've kind of gotten that nickname. Turkey vultures sometimes get grouped in with birds of prey. There's a lot of confusion about where they fall in that, but they're not really hunters, they are scavengers. If you have a heartbeat, you don't have to worry about a turkey vulture because they want to eat things that are kind of gross and decayed. That's their favorite food. In fact, they have a lot of really cool adaptations to help them with that. And one of their adaptations is their ability to smell. Now, most birds do have somewhat of a sense of smell, but nothing compared to a turkey vulture's sense of smell. In fact, turkey vultures have a more sensitive sense of smell than dogs do. And when you think about it, their food isn't making a lot of noise, so they can't listen for it. It's not running around, so they can't look for it. The only thing it's doing is stinking up the joint. So these guys use that sensitive sense of smell to find rotten, dead, decaying things. To a turkey vulture, a dead, rotten deer smells an awful lot like a Happy Meal would smell to a child. They love it. But there are a lot of things that come along with making sure that that sense of smell stays safe and stays strong. So these guys have what we call the 3 Ps. First, they pick their noses. Second, they projectile vomit. And third, they poop in their feet. Well, kind of. Pooping on their feet with birds poop and pee at the same time. All of it comes out one opening and all of it is all mixed together. But the reason they do that is twofold. For one, they're standing in a lot of gross things with lots of dangerous microbes, bacteria, viruses, stuff like that. And by going to the bathroom on their feet, they're able to kill off all of those dangerous microbes because their waste is highly acidic. On top of that, as the waste evaporates away, it helps to cool them off. So it does two things for them. So it's kind of like when turkey vultures need to take a bath, they poop on themselves. As for projectile vomiting, turkey vultures are gluttons. They eat so much that sometimes they're too heavy to effectively fly. So their ability to projectile vomit is a defense mechanism. If you're a coyote and you want to eat a turkey vulture and you run up to them ready to have them for a snack, and then that vulture vomits all over your face, well, that's kind of gross and distracting, right? Plus, maybe the coyote will just eat the vomit instead. On top of that, it makes the turkey vulture instantly lightweight. Like we were learning about with the bar doll, hollow bones are important, going to the bathroom a lot is important, all to keep the weight down. And by immediately emptying their stomach out, once again, they lighten the load and they're able to fly away faster. So that's a really important adaptation that they have. Now the third, picking their noses, we just learned, turkey vulture's sense of smell is super important. If you look, you'll notice that you can see right through his nostril. That is called a perforate nostril. And he has an extra long middle toe. It's disproportionately long. And he literally sticks, by the way, he's preening his feathers right now, just like you brush your hair in the morning. So he's pretty comfortable. He's fancying himself up. But anyways, he sticks that extra long middle toe right through that perforate nostril, gives it a little swirl, and clears it out. If you're a human being, that would be considered bad manners. But when you're a turkey vulture, it's important to your survival. So you can keep that sense of smell clear so that you can find food. Now, a lot of people wonder why turkey vultures are bald. If I gave you a bowl of mashed potatoes and gravy, and I tied your arms behind your back and told you to eat that bowl of mashed potatoes and gravy, it would be a weird thing to do, but it would be hard to do without your hair getting disgusting and nasty and matted. But what if you didn't have hair? What if we shaved your head bald first and then told you to do that? It's a lot easier to keep your head clean if you don't have hair or if you don't have feathers. So because they're eating a lot of kind of gooey, gross stuff, they don't have feathers on their head. His neck is a bit longer. He can stretch that out. Even part of his neck is bald. He just kind of has himself tucked in right now. But some people say, you know, okay, that's all great, but why do we need turkey vultures? They're ugly and gross. Why do we need them? Well, we need them because scavengers are Earth's sanitation crew. They clean up all of the dead, disgusting stuff that could make us sick and that could breed disease. One turkey vulture can eat over 10,000 times the amount of botulism bacteria that it would take to drop you and I dead in a heartbeat and not even get indigestion. So these guys are very important, and for the health, oh, he's gonna stretch his wings out a little bit. Give it a good stretch, just a little bit of bird yoga for you. But they're very important in eliminating a lot of diseases that come along with dead, rotting carcasses, so they're good to have around. By the way, when you see them flying high up in the sky, they're not usually circling something dead. A lot of times when they're doing that, they're finding thermals, which is where the hot air rises up from the ground. So the sun heats up the ground, all that air gets heated up, and then it rises. And so the turkey vultures can soar on those thermals without flapping their wings. It's a great energy saver while they keep their nose out for food. So that's a really cool thing that they do. And you'll notice that he just coughed up a little bit of bone and fur right there. So a little bit gross, but an important mechanism for them to get rid of the stuff they can't digest. Some really amazing birds. Oh, by the way, another question we get a lot is, well, how do I know if what I'm seeing is a bald eagle or a turkey vulture? It's actually really easy. For one, a bald eagle's head up in the sky is going to look big and round, and a turkey vulture's head is going to look a little bitty sprouty because he doesn't have any feathers on there, right? But another way to tell is turkey vultures fly in a shallow V. It's called a dihedral. And they're going to go right like that. Their wingtips are going to flare up and they're going to rock in that shallow V. Whereas a bald eagle is going to fly in a flat line and they're going to kind of soar side to side. I do want to mention that when it comes to soaring, even though bald eagles may look more majestic, turkey vultures are way more graceful. They have a much longer wingspan in comparison to their body size. So they are built for soaring on those thermals. So maybe not the prettiest bird in the world, but certainly one of the coolest birds out there. All right, guys, we're gonna be back in just a little bit to learn about another really cool ambassador, and you're gonna get to speak with Sammy this time. We'll see you soon.
Hi everyone, it's Sammy, and I'm here with our Eastern fox snake ambassador. Eastern fox snakes are a native, non-venomous constrictor snake to Ohio. So native, they're from here. Fox snakes are found in about 5 counties in Ohio. They are actually listed as a species of concern, mainly because of habitat fragmentation, people wanting to keep these guys as pets if they find them out there, and also people unnecessarily killing them because they're afraid of them, which we'll get into in a second. But they are also non-venomous constrictors, so they squeeze their prey before they swallow it whole, and if this snake were to bite you, it's harmless. Of course he has a mouth and teeth, so he can bite. Any animal with a mouth and teeth can bite, even us, but his teeth are really small, so he poses no danger to a human being. Now, fox snakes are found right along the coast of Lake Erie. They're kind of known for living in a Lake Erie, kind of a marshy habitat, but really easy to spot out there if you go for a hike in any of the areas, and especially where we are in Erie County. Snakes have so many adaptations though built into their bodies. The first we'll talk about is kind of what makes a reptile, and that's that they're covered in scales. His whole body is covered in scales, which are made out of keratin, the same thing as your nails or your hair are made out of. And keratin though isn't stretchy like our skin is. So when this snake has to shed his skin to grow, it all comes off in one big chunk. We have a snake skin right here from actually one of our black rat snakes, the largest snakes in Ohio that can get to be over 8 feet long. But guess what? They're harmless too. But this is what a snake shed looks like. So they shed their scales in order to grow, to replace old worn out ones. And if you look actually right here, this is where its head was. You're gonna see 2 little bubbles right there. What part of the body do you think that was? Their eyes. Snakes even have scales that cover their eyes called an eye cap, and it just helps them for extra protection. It's like they always have a pair of goggles on. Because when they're eating their food, they are swallowing it whole, and it's right by their eyes. That mouse doesn't really want to be eaten, it might try to scratch, so that works like a pair of extra protection for them. Now, snakes also have the adaptation of being able to open their mouths really wide to swallow their food. As you can tell pretty obviously, he has no arms or legs to help him. So he has to open his wide and swallow food whole. So when this snake catches, maybe a mouse or a squirrel out there, they have special jaws and extra special stretchy ligaments in there that help them to open their mouths over 5 times as large as their own heads are. Pretty common myth out there is that people think that they actually dislocate their jaws to do that. That's not actually what they do. Everything stays together. Everything's just super flexible compared to what humans have in their mouths. You'll notice too how he keeps flicking his tongue in and out. He does that in order to kind of taste the world around them. Snakes smell things very differently from how people do. What he's doing is flicking his forked tongue out and collecting molecules that are floating in the air off of everything. He collects those molecules on the tip part of his tongue, puts that tongue back into his mouth, up into the roof of his mouth, into an organ called the Jacobson's organ. And that kind of translates everything up into his brain, so he can put a name to what those molecules were and know if something is food or not, something he has to be worried about, or something that he can just keep slithering by. But snakes really perceive the world in a different way than a lot of humans do, through vibrations and through sights and sounds that they have to process differently than us. Now, snakes are kind of an animal out there that do get a little bit of a bad rap, especially this kind of snake. he has a really awesome adaptation of mimicry. He's kind of a copycat out there. And he's, like I said earlier, completely harmless. So he has to try to find ways to protect himself. And part of that is looking like more dangerous snakes. So he mimics venomous snakes. We do have some species of venomous snakes in Ohio. We have the eastern Massasauga rattlesnake up in northern Ohio, and we do have the copperhead and the timber rattler down in southern Ohio. And the coloration on his scales look kind of like the copperhead or the Massasauga, so that right off the bat makes him seem really scary. Snakes like him also do a form of Batesian mimicry, and that's what they do when they shake their tail really fast to make them sound like they have a rattle when there's actually no rattle on there. So he can shake that tail against the ground, some leaves, a rock, and he sounds like a rattlesnake when he's doing that. So he doesn't really have anything to back that up though. He doesn't have venom in him. So he's hoping that that animal maybe had a bad experience with a rattlesnake in the past or knows that that sound is scary and will stay away. Because like I said earlier, there's really nothing the snake can do to a human. And it's okay to be afraid of animals out there, or to even really not like snakes, but to remember that they are harmless and that they are really important to have in our environment. All animals have their own special roles out there, and snakes actually really help people. They're a huge form of free pest control. You know, no one really wants a little mouse in their cupboard, but we're not really thinking about the animals that prevent those other prey animals from getting into our spaces. If you have a snake in your backyard, he's eating those mice before they get to you. He acts as a buffer between you and them. So he not only helps us, but he's also getting meals out of it. So it kind of works two ways. But snakes are really awesome animals out there, and we want to make sure that we try to instill a respect in people with them, because a lot of people do think that the only good snake is a dead snake. And we want to make sure that these guys stay healthy out there so that we can also stay healthy, because it goes both ways.
Alright guys, so that's all we have for you today. I hope you enjoyed learning about the amazing wildlife ambassadors here at Back to the Wild. And if you have any questions at all, leave them right down in the comments or shoot us a message. We are happy to answer anything that you got. And thank you guys so much for joining us, and have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.